this, and we just wear it like this because it's natural. Because the reason for it, you might say, is like a new awareness among black people that their own natural appearance, physical appearance, is beautiful.
Naturally beautiful. And her beautiful natural hair is her crowning glory.
Isn't it beautiful? All right.
My name is Joan Tarika Lewis, and yes, it is Women's Month. And I just did an exhibition with the Black Woman as God with Karen Seneferu and over at Soma Arts Gallery and through AAACC. Melora, Melanie Green, they all created this awesome, this really amazing exhibition to honor Black women. Not only what they continue to do, but of the women in my own family. And I was blessed with knowing my mother, had a stay-at-home mother who came from a big family, and well, they were some survivors. They were California pioneers. Her mother was a California pioneer. I'm just finding out recently one of the great-grandfather gained his freedom, was an abolitionist. And I'm finding so many amazing women in the family who kept families together, who kept the stories alive, who kept everybody healthy with their knowledge of food and food as medicine, as training the next generation. That also instilled, pride in us. My aunties made sure that we were on point, that we were on schedule, that we had little goals and big goals, and that we had a daily routine to abide by. Because, working with kids every day, I see that lack of training, of responsibility, and focus. And there's so many kids who don't know how to show up and be a student, and how important our history is, and how important empathy is, problem solving, and love for our community, and how it extends, and how to treat people. And as far as our responsibility in giving back to our community, that came from the women in our immediate families and in our community, came out of Oakland, and it came out of the organizations and churches and associations that they belonged to at the time of the turn of the century and before that. And so I think we have a lot to be grateful for the women in our community, and respect for what they have given us. And we show our respect by carrying on those legacies and then giving back to the elders in the community. I co-direct a little orchestra called the Oakland Spirit Orchestra. And this is pre-pandemic and quarantine, where we would take our children that we were training as young musicians, as violinists, as pianists, as wind players, and as part of giving back to the community, we've been at several senior centers where they play for our seniors, and at Dunsmuir House, and just recently, in the last 3 years, we had played for some Eritrean and Ethiopian elders who they get together and they break bread, they exercise together, and mostly everyone could not speak a word of English, but when they saw us, they ran and came and hugged us. And after the first time we played, we thought, okay, it was just the first time. Then they started inviting us back. The next time they brought their instruments, and for us to learn how to play their instruments from the homeland. And then the next time, they brought videos and they showed us how the music was played and the dances. And for our kids to see that and to be able to communicate with someone directly from the continent, it was a tearful reunion. Every time we went there to play for them and break bread with them and do Tai Chi with them and talk with them and get an interpreter to say, what did I say? And our little girl's like, oh, she braid hair just like my grandma. Her hair looks just, and another one will say, she looks like my grandma, and some of them were mistaken the children for being Ethiopian. And so, very special session. So we teach the next generation how to give back and the way to give back, and so that's just one of the things we do.
So my first poem is inspired by Florida Jit by Vincent Miranda. It's the Emerging Artist exhibit on the second floor. And I did live in Florida for some time, although I don't claim the state. My parents live there now. And this experience in the exhibit definitely gave me a vibe of swampy days and humid nights. And that's where this poem comes from. You can actually go to the next slide also, Mia. So this is the swampy days, humid nights vibe, video installation on the wall, and some really delicate, intricate pieces of art with texture and sweat beads and mosquitoes and flowers and skin. It's really good work. And so my poem is on the next slide, and I will read it now. It's called, What is a Jit? What is a jit? A disembodied grin sits in a face, framed in flora and dripping sweat. Mosquitoes swarming, a gesture. Captured. What does it mean to be a nigga with confidence? A young brown boy peacocking. A soft nigga who likes flowers and records bird songs and films sunsets. What does it mean to steam up car windows on summer nights? Breath meets sticky air, meets sticky fingers, meets wet lips, meets. What does it mean to be a jit in a country full of niggas? A drop in a sea of diaspora, when Black already always is more.
So my artistic journey, I started off about 10 years ago, just taking classes, drawing classes, painting classes, art history classes. And for me, the mediums that have really stuck with me along the way have been oil paint. That's probably my biggest. I'd probably say that I use that maybe 90% of the time. Other mediums that, that I find enjoyable are gouache. I do like acrylic and play around with acrylic, but if I could choose between acrylic and oil, it's always going to be oil. I also play around with like paper collaging and things of that nature too. So I'm a Bay Area native. I was born in LA, raised all throughout the Bay Area. My work is derived from my personal experience. I think that I have ties to the Bay, of course, because I've lived here my whole life, but I aim to explore universal themes and narratives about womanhood, about Blackness. I think that, my work is really bright and colorful and cheerful, and that might have something to do with the landscape and just being in California and having so much access to sunshine. So I think all of those things kind of are, looped into my art practice. There's an artist called Woliski Kandinsky, and he wrote a book called Concerning the Spiritual in Art. So that's a big inspiration for me. The book itself views art as a spiritual endeavor. Visually, I'm also a big fan of Carl Van Vechten. He's a white photographer, but he photographed a lot of our artists and entertainers from the Harlem Renaissance era. And recently, Amy Sherald is a big inspiration as well. I think what draws me to her work is the stoicness and the elegance that she incorporates when painting Black people. I think we all kind of, trends tend to be everywhere. So there's, at some point it's going to make its way into your work, whether you're trying to incorporate it or not. A lot of people will see, the theme of the third eye in my work, particularly from the last 5 years, because that work, having that third eye just kind of documents, some of the spiritual lessons that I've learned along the way. It's a big conversation opener as well. The trends in terms of like line work, that has also made its way into my work. But I like to do that in a way of really drawing it into the story. Like you might see it on someone's clothing, or you might see it on the wall, that kind of thing. I would say those are the two big trends that tend to make its way into my work. I like line work because it's quick and it's a little bit more like free flowing. It's very much impromptu. I think when I'm making work, depending on what type of art you make, it can get very studious. And I think that line work is a way to kind of break away from that and add like an element of fun as you're making the work, not necessarily for the viewer. Favorite part is kind of diving into the creation process and like not just kind of creating a world that's mine, that I have autonomy over. It's this really fun dance of intuition, like spiritual lessons, intuition. You're bringing your knowledge into play as well, your skill set. It's this really fun dance of like serious and fun and spirit. So that's what I like about art in general. What I dislike about art is, I don't know. I think, if you speak to a recording artist, they're going to tell you that they love making the work. What they don't like is doing interviews, or they don't like touring. For me, I think, getting to ask the same questions over and over again can get pretty dull, especially if you're trying to speak to an audience that doesn't necessarily gravitate towards art as an interest of theirs. I think in the beginning of things, I feel like I experienced some competitiveness from other artists in the community towards me, and I didn't necessarily like that feeling. And I also, this could be an evergreen topic, but I don't necessarily enjoy the pressure to teach and explain my Blackness in my work to white people or to non-Black people. I don't like the politicizing of my work. Sometimes I intentionally don't include any like political messages, and it finds its way down there that path anyway. And that can get a little frustrating for me. I've had lots of ups and downs. Navigating the professional art industry requires a lot of resilience. Sometimes you're in conversations with people or organizations and, for months, and then things don't necessarily materialize, and that can be frustrating. I think the best way that I deal with it is to just keep moving. Just keep moving forward. Just always kind of create something to look forward to, whether I'm, working on something for someone else or an organization, or working on something for myself. I think the best advice I could give to anyone who's interested in this path is to learn to like yourself and your work, and that's going to push you through. Because when you're looking for people to validate the decisions you're making in your work, or to even say that it's good, that's when you lose. You just got to keep going. I definitely think my style is ever evolving. I've always worked with color because I believe heavily in the psychology of color and the emotions that it brings out in terms of the viewer looking at the work. I would say that in general, I've just gotten better at, painting people. I'm always interested in responding to something negative and transmuting that into something positive. I have moments where, the work gets really bright and colorful and wild, and then it also gets very muted. Last year, I did a lot of work in blue tones. So, but now I'm working on something completely different. So I have the same language with art, but it just kind of changes and shifts, if that makes sense. I always use blue in my work. It's rare to find a painting that doesn't have some blue in it somewhere. But when I decided to just make work exclusively in cool tones and blue tones, that's because the world just seemed like it was on fire. A lot of things happened in 2020 and 2021. When I started making that work, we were in a pandemic. The protests were happening all over the country and the world, really. And then we also had those crazy fires. So all of that was kind of swimming around in my subconscious. And I just really wanted to focus in on this color that brings me peace, So it was intentional.
I dreamt about Mama on the beach again, about floating off to sea and looking back to see her just there, lounging. Or was it standing on the shoreline, hand to brow, squinting into the horizon to make sure she saw me, bobbing out there somewhere? I still don't know if it was real, but it was felt. What does it mean to feel paradise? To know it in an embodied sense, in a spiritual heart, like the warm sun on your neck, the gentle push of a breeze, the sounds of home vibrating around you. What does it mean to return to a paradise lost? To show up on the Nile shores and find it has been destroyed. Piles of burning rubber where memories once lived. Closed fences around Hosh Abuk, and a strange sense that the porch will never be open to the street again. What does it mean to seek a paradise lost, knowing that both home and paradise don't have a location fixed in space, but are rather moving parts in this diaspora puzzle? What does it mean to make paradise wherever you are, and knowing that it too will be lost in the time, but to not cling to this outcome, instead wrestle with the process, collaborate on its creation, and maybe have some fun along the way? What does it mean to seek joy and rest and paradise for Black people at the end of times? How will it feel? And what will it look like? I imagine moments of freedom, strung together like prayer beads that I offer to the ocean. I imagine no prisons or police or military, just vibes. I imagine everyone I love in one place, even just briefly. I imagine running water and loud birds and a dry breeze. I imagine self-care Sunday every day and angels at my bedside. And I imagine you. I imagine you. Thank you.